What up, guys? It's Josiah here, and today we're reading Red Kayak Chapter 9. Let's begin. It freaked me out seeing that kayak under the water. At home, I hid it in my room and didn't tell either of my parents about it. I halfway I halfway through I was going nuts, and that kind of thinking scared me a little. Mom brought me some dinner, a grilled cheese and some soup, but it sat there growing cold until I gave the sandwich to Tilly. Dad came in later. He was worn out from the crabbing all day. I was at my desk and pushed my chair back, glad that Dad had come in. "Good run," he reported. "Hauled in 15 bushels, mostly females, though," he said, disappointed. "Females didn't bring in half the value of a good-sized Jimmy." I hoped Dad would sit at the end of the bed and stay because I wanted to tell him how twisted up I felt inside. Glad you ate the sandwich," he said. I glanced at Tilly. "Your mother was getting worried, you know how she is." "I'm okay," I said quickly. "I think I'm anyway. I'm not sure. I think I am anyway. I'm not sure." My father pushed his hands into his pockets. "Look, Brady," he said. "Don't blame yourself. You were the hero yesterday for all you done, finding Ben, giving him CPR, and getting him down to Hall. We're proud of you. What you did, what you've done, the way it turned out." He shook his head. "It's not your fault. I just don't want you blaming yourself, son." I nodded. I appreciated everything he said, and didn't know how bad I felt about not calling out a warning when I seen the red kayak that morning before school. "You can stay home tomorrow if you want." "Thanks," I said, but a day off from school was not what I needed. I wanted to tell Dad about how scared I was, how I still felt responsible. The words stuck in my throat, though Dad died. "Why don't you turn in? Get some sleep." I knew Dad hated to talk about feelings and stuff like that. It's one reason why my mother left for such a long time after Amanda died. Leastways, that's what I heard her tell Grandma once on the telephone. "You know, Tom, I can't tell him how I feel about anything." "Well, I'm going to hit the tick," Dad said, turning to go. "Got to get up early to make a run for the northeastern comes in. More rain, they're saying." I nodded. I knew I lost my chance to talk. Softly, Dad closed the door, and he left. I sat staring at the Michael Jordan poster on the back of the bedroom door. JT and Digger had the same poster because we played basketball a lot. I gave them the poster when Jordan made his comeback with the Washington Wizards. I turned around and then powered up the computer to see if there were any emails from Mia, and I saw two messages, one from Lauren Melody, saying she was really sorry for what happened to the little boy and what a brave thing I must have done. The other from JT. It wasn't much like this. It wasn't much like this. "Brady, I'm sorry for what happened. At least he had acknowledged it," I thought. At that night I couldn't help myself. Couldn't Excuse me, I'm tired. That night I couldn't sleep. For hours I lay in bed thinking about the D'Angelos and worrying what they were doing. I knew that Mrs. D'Angelo was in the hospital. Where was Mr. D'Angelo? Was he at the hospital too? Or was he at home, alone, watching TV, sitting on his back, steps crying? And what about Ben? Did they ever cover him up with a sheet, the way you see in movies? Was he in a room alone? Where? Was his spirit up in heaven already? What was that like? Would he or his parents ever know how hard I tried? I got up twice to get a drink of water. I just got up to look out the window. And I got up once to take Tilly outside and stood for a long time at my mother's butterfly garden outside the back kitchen door. It was clear and cold, with just enough moonlight to see the brick path Dad had made. All the different bushes were so pretty in the summer All different bushes were so pretty in the summer, were brown and broken from the long winter. But there was a measure to comfort standing in the butterfly garden, because I knew it was there for Amanda. The sweet, painful memory of my sister had paled over the years, but I would never forget. I was 7 years old when she came and went, and we never ever talked about Amanda. We don't even refer to her, leastways not in front of my mother. There is nothing in our in our house to even suggest Amanda ever existed. Not a stuffed animal or picture or a piece of her clothing, nothing. My parents packed some of the stuff in the trunk and got rid of the rest. Then they locked that trunk and put it in the corner of the attic. The only thing left was Amanda's name on the back of the Dad's boat, and Dad wasn't about to paint over it. Despite my mother, he stood his ground on that one. I, I scuffed down the brick path on a ways and thought about how some things had changed forever. That morning, my parents found Amanda in her crib, not breathing. My mother blamed herself. She kept crying about how she should have checked on the baby during the night, and I wondered if Miss D'Angelo would blame herself the same way. Would she regret not telling Ben it was too cold to go out on the kayak, or did they didn't have time, or that she couldn't find the life jackets? God, I thought, why didn't I just yell something? In my weaker moments, I still think she might have heard me. Back inside, I tried to sleep again. I couldn't even close my eyes. At 4 a.m., when I heard Dad get up to go crabbing, I got up to go with him. Maybe out there we'd find some time to talk, I thought. Maybe that would help. I wasn't sure. I knew I couldn't sleep, and I didn't want to be in bed alone in the dark anymore. "You're up?" Dad rubbed his eyes. He was surprised, but he is not one to make a big deal out of anything. "I want to go with you." He didn't blink an eye. "All right by me," he said. "Why don't you fix us some sandwiches while I get dressed?" I was glad for the work. I put together 4 thick sandwiches with cold cuts, American cheese, and lots of mustard and mayonnaise. Put them on a little plastic bag and threw them in the cooler with some blue ice and a couple of apples and bananas. I tossed in a box of Oreos too. Then a big bottle of grapefruit juice for Dad and 2 cans of Dr. Pepper for me. By the time I was finished making lunch and got myself dressed, Dad had fixed his thermos of coffee and was ready to go too. We headed out together. Till he left to whimper inside the back door because it was still dark. We had to use a flashlight to see our way down to the tool shed where my father kept his bait and the 2 old refrigerators. We pulled out 5 brushes of brown razor clams, dumped them in our baskets, and carried them down to the workboat. It took us 2 trips to get all of the bait on board. While Dad checked everything on Miss Amanda, the water, the oil, the fuel. I turned on the radar, flipped the lights on and off, and turned both the VHF and the AM/FM radio on. Dad liked a country music station out of Baltimore, which drove me nuts, but I left it on low, figuring I'd better not say anything since I was missing a day of school to be there. By 5:30, we were ready to set out. Dad liked working his first hour or so in the dark, because he could beat the wind that way. The wind comes up between 8 and 10 in the morning. If it's in your face, it makes the job more time consuming. "You gotta beat the wind to make time," Dad always says. "You gotta make time." Outside in the brisk air, with a few early songbirds starting up, and our eyes getting used to the darkness, I felt a little better, like somehow life was going on. After we cast the lines, Dad let me go up to the front of the doghouse to drive the workboat out of its slip into the creek. Then he came in a few seconds later to pick up the radio and checked in with his best friend, Kenny Larry. Kenny kept on his boat up near Rock Hall, where most of the local crabbers, and was stocking his boat. So Dad said, "See you out there," as we left the creek and turned into the river to keep going south on the pass of Queenstown. The river would hook around in the west. Then the north would empty into Chesapeake Bay, but mostly we'd crabbed the river. We didn't talk about Ben or what had happened. We stepped into our rubber overalls, pulled on our rubber gloves, and started winching in crab pots, dumping out crabs and refilling the bait holders with clams. I figured that eventually the subject would come on. About an hour later, there was a beautiful sunrise. "Looky there," Dad said, pausing to wipe sweat off his forehead with the back of his hand. We paused a moment to marvel at how the rising rim of gold sunlight announced itself by illuminating the sky with brilliant road streaks of pink, purple, and orange. "Just think," Dad went on as he plucked out a small crab from the wooden bin where everything from each pot got dumped and sorted. "You and me, Brady, we've seen sunrises We've seen more sunrises in a month than some people in their whole lives. He tossed the underside crab back in the water. It was true. A good sunrise was awesome. I watched the little crab depart beneath the waves. His second chance, I thought. Maybe he'd live to grow big enough to become a keeper one day. At 10 a.m., we sat on top of the huge engine box in the middle of the boat and had lunch. By then, I was pretty hungry, but after half a sandwich, I didn't feel like eating anymore. Dad noticed. "You can change the station if you want." "That's okay," I told him. I wish he had asked how I was feeling instead. "It's not the station," I said. But he didn't. But he didn't bite. Still being out there with Dad, seeing the beautiful sky, should have done more for me. By late morning, we had several bushels of crabs sitting there, all separated in bushel baskets. There was a short row for bushels of number one males, those 5 3/4 inches or more. Then 3 baskets mixed with males, 5 or 5 3/4. The fourth bushel was females. Was a time when I'd have twice as many crabs here for the work we done this morning, Dad said soberly as he surveyed the catch. "But the price is up," I said, shrugging. "We caught less, but we made more per bushel, didn't we?" My father lifted his cap and stroked the back of his head. "Ain't the same, Brady, and I worry about it." When Dad went up to answer a call on the radio, I stood for a long time staring down at the hole we'd made, watching the crabs while they blew bubbles and snapped at one another. I remember thinking how pretty they were, with their moist olive green shells, and their bright blue stripe down their claws. And I had an odd thought about how this was the end for them. There would be no more second chances, no more swimming in the beautiful bay or the coastal river. They'd be in someone's steamer that night. This was not a normal way to think of it. Not for me. But a dark sense of dread washed over me, and I almost couldn't breathe. It had nothing to do with this scenario of crabs feeling sorry for the bay. No, it was all because of Ben. Ben, who didn't get a second chance, who wouldn't grow now. I was suffocating, and no one knew it. I had to do something. So I flipped out. I mean, how else would you explain the fact that all of a sudden I started picking up those baskets and dumping everything back overboard? Hope you guys enjoyed this chapter. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.